Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone you have the yellow assessment forms with you, so just make sure you fill those out. And then back at the 1877 Club, there'll be a box where you can drop all of those off at the end of the day. So we are excited to welcome our speakers at our breakout session today. We have Yasmin Sokar Hartford she's a reference librarian and a law library professor from the CUNY School of Law, and Mary Godfrey Rickards, the assistant director of technical services and associate law library professor from the CUNY School of Law. And they'll be guiding us through reconceptualizing failure, developing student resilience in research class.
Well, hello. I hope everyone enjoyed that wonderful lunch. It was delicious. So today, we're going to discuss the F word, failure. And we'd like to share a framework that we've been developing that incorporates failure to motivate deep learning and resilience in the classroom. So I hope you can see this quote by the cool dude in the skate park. Once you fall, you won't be afraid anymore. That's the whole point of skateboarding, right? Now, Yasmin came across this gym.
So I live next to a skate park. So I get to see a lot of falls. And I cut through the skate park almost every day. And one day I was walking by and this is what I heard. Once you fall, you won't be afraid anymore. That's the whole point of skateboarding, bro. And it was what I think was an experienced skateboarder to a inexperienced fellow. And I was like, wow, that's exactly what we're doing our presentation on. What we've been talking about. We should invite these guys to come with us.
So it's like, it is sort of like what we're saying, like once you accept failure as part of the learning process, you sort of take the sting out of it. And you're not like afraid of that struggle anymore. And that's like the whole part of deep learning. So today, our goals are a bit steep, but we're gonna try. We're going to briefly go over what we're calling the word soup, language behind the concept of mindset, how being aware of mindset can be beneficial to us as instructors, and how failure can be a tool to promote deep learning. Now we're going to focus on mindset and bringing failure into the classroom, and we're going to go over why we think that it's important for students and why it's appropriate in research instruction, how failure fits in, and how you might achieve that in the research classroom. Then we're going to break up into groups, or we're in nice little groups already, and we're just going to try to, an interactive exercise where we're going to try to apply it. So the word soup. Now you've heard this morning, but there's been a lot of work by psychologists such as Carol Dweck on the idea of mindset and how it relates to learning. At its essence, mindset refers to how you think about your intelligence. Do you believe that your level of intelligence is fixed? That's it. What you have to prove that intelligence, it's not going to change no matter what you do, or do you believe that your intelligence is something that can be developed? Now, Dweck used the terms fixed and growth mindset, where growth mindset suggests that intelligence is something that can be developed. One's abilities can be developed. But with that, their response to feedback differs from someone who has a fixed mindset. And someone with a fixed mindset, it's just that. They view their level of intelligence as something that's a fixed trait. Now, Dweck studied this relationship for decades, and more recently, other educators, including legal educators like Casey Bishop, have continued to study how mindset relates to the legal academy. But although that we're at a law school and we deal with legal research with law students, we think that this is true across the board. But with all of the current studies, there's developed a rather extended vocabulary. And we're just going to touch on a few of the bit of the terminology. So as I said, Dweck developed the growth mindset and fixed mindset, and explained how students responded to feedback. Similarly, other researchers use terms such as incremental theories, which is really more towards traits of the growth mindset, and entity theories, which is more traits of the fixed mindset. And you also have like mastery goals, which is consistent with growth mindset, and performance goals, which are basically more familiar with consistent with the traits of fixed mindset. And there's been other terms as resilience, which we heard about a lot today, grit, struggle, and failure, and they've been discussed related to these concepts as well. But for the purposes of our presentation, we're limiting our vocabulary to be consistent with Casey Bishop's concept of failure pedagogy, which is based on Dweck's mindset research. So we're going to go back to mindset, and we're going to see why it's important and how mindsets respond to failure.
Okay, so looking a little closer at mindset and how that affects the response to failure, when we look at this, there really is something to that the kind of mindset that you have shapes and how you respond to failure, how you respond to making mistakes or screwing it up. It's related to belief. So people with a fixed mindset, they believe that their intelligence is fixed, you can't change it, that's it. They focus on performance, meaning, did I get an A? Did I get a check plus?
And we did have that. A student, as we went by, she said, is it a check plus? Plus, please.
We can
If it helps.
They believe that they're failing because they just don't have the ability. They're just not smart. So when they encounter failure, making mistakes, what happens? They get frustrated, they give up. They think that struggle is useless. They think it's just, well, I don't have the ability. And a lot of times they blame the teachers. That happens a lot. It's the teacher has this wrong assessment, and that's it. On the other hand, students with growth or incremental mindset, they think that their intelligence is fluid, malleable. They can change it. They focus on mastering. So instead of saying, did I get a check plus, or what's the best grade I can get, did I learn? Do I know more than I did before? Do I have more abilities than I had before? And they see that failure in making mistakes as a necessity. You just have to go through it in order to learn. So when faced with mistakes, they continue on. They might enjoy the challenge. They see that connection between effort and mastery over the subject. And they do see it as something that's necessary for learning. That leads to, it's connected to that resilience and grit that we've been discussing all day. So what are the benefits of this specifically in the classroom? This quote is from an article by David Scott Yeager and Carol Dweck called Mindsets That Promote Resilience, when students believe that personal characteristics can be developed. And we really like this quote. It really is the core of so much of what we're saying. If students can be redirected to see intellectual ability as something that can be developed over time with effort, good strategies, and help from others, then they are more resilient when they encounter the rigorous learning opportunities presented to them. So how is and why is growth mindset important to students as a whole? Again, we primarily work with the law students, but we think that it really just applies to so many types of students. The reality of academia is that it does promote a fixed mindset. With its emphasis on performance indicators, such as grades and ranking, it focuses the students' concentration on what they got. Did I get the check plus? That's what's important. Academia also introduces new challenges, and that kind of promotes a fixed mindset. The students come in, they may not have encountered this level of learning or education yet, and so they have a new challenge, and this creates vulnerabilities for them, particularly when facing failure. So taking that to research instruction, how does growth mindset appropriate in research instruction? Well, we think that research is a skill that can be learned and strengthened. It's taught as an iterative and analytical process of problem solving, which can be buttressed by growth mindset and resilience. And then going in the other direction, when the students go through an iterative and analytical process, the growth mindset is promoted. The two things, they complement each other. So how does failure fit into all this? So again, student response to failure is related to whether or not they have a growth or fixed mindset. Remember that students with a growth mindset, they enjoy the challenge, they don't get frozen with fear, and they realize that their efforts are leading to mastery, and they just need to fail in order to keep learning and keep growing. While students with a fixed mindset get frustrated, and since they're more concerned with performance, they prove that they know the right answer or they got to the right thing, that leads to a more cursory learning rather than a deep learning. So they do tend to get frustrated. We think that the way that you run your class can encourage a growth mindset. Specifically, your class can help shape their response to failure. So how would you go about doing this in the classroom? Well, we looked at 3 things: creating a safe space, incorporating failure and meaningful struggle, and the way you give feedback. So this is based on some readings we did with educators who thought about this and came up with some ideas. For example, Casey Bishop described her approach as failure pedagogy. Based on Dweck's mindset as a foundation, Bishop discusses the benefits of incorporating failure into the legal classroom, and she focuses more on doctrinal classes, but she uses this failure pedagogy to motivate growth mindset in students. Similarly, using the growth mindset as a basis, Carrie Sperling and Susan Shapcott focus specifically on students' response to failure. In other words, their response to the feedback that they get in the context of legal writing. And they found that through meaningful assessment by way of effective feedback, they could promote growth mindset. Based on their work, we're developing an approach to incorporate failure into research instruction by way of a not very tidy and straightforward research exercise. We think that doing this, having it be a messy exercise, creates opportunity for meaningful struggle for the student rather than just like, what's the answer? Let's race to it and get to the answer. And then through constructive feedback, we can potentially create in-depth learning and resilience developing opportunities for our students. But how do you incorporate failure into the classroom? Again, what do we consider? We're considering setting a safe space, creating a safe space for that failure to happen. When incorporating failure into the exercise, making sure that the struggle is meaningful struggle, that there's something behind it rather than just, we can't get it, well, what are we gonna do? And then through the kind of feedback that we're giving.
So, when we're talking about creating a safe space, I need glasses, otherwise nothing's gonna happen. So when we're talking about creating a safe space, look, we're not talking about burning sage, yoga mat, we're not doing any of that. I don't mean any of that. But I do think that it's important for us to remember that students need, in a university environment, that, and we said this before, that they may be frozen with fear. Fear of not knowing the answer, fear of being humiliated. And in a way, that's sort of like a failure to them also, by not meeting some expectation perhaps. An expectation they may have set for themselves, some expectation somebody else may have set for them, or some expectation they may have thought you set for them. So, so you'll have that, you deal with that. But then you also have, and for new students, you may have this students overcompensating with some bravado, to pretend that, they've got it all together. But meanwhile, they're petrified. And what we need to do is to try to create that space where they're not afraid to give a wrong answer. They're not afraid they'll take that risk to say something and not be correct, and to try to learn from it. So, or to make a mistake. So, what are some of the things we should consider? First, and I think we talked about this a bit earlier, I think at our table we even talked about this, acknowledging the research abilities that the student has already. But let them understand that there's going to be a trajectory. We've heard take from a novice researcher to more of an expert researcher. The point is, and I've gotten feedback from people about this, but the point, for me, the point is, let them know that there's going to be a trajectory. We recognize the skills that you have, but there's going to be a growth so that they understand that you're not there yet. Casey Bishop talks about the power of the word yet. You'll get it, but you're just not there yet. And again, explain the iterative nature of research, that it's going to be challenging, but it's fine. There are new research databases, there are new ways of searching, something other than Google. There's new content that they'll be searching, and it may be challenging. They won't get there, they're not there yet, but it's okay. Sherling and Shapcott said this about legal writing, but I believe this to be true with research as well, that it can be mastered with effort and process. And very often, it might be good to emphasize to the student that the benefits of struggle. But more than likely, the things that you retain or recall, information that you retain and recall later, may be something that you found to be very difficult. Like, I don't know if you remember learning how to ride a bicycle. I remember learning how to ride a bicycle, and let's just say there were a few cars in a particular parking lot in the Bronx that were a little worse for wear after I learned how to ride a bicycle than before. But I still ride. And that's the point. Let them know that the struggle is part of the learning. And something that we do, like sometimes you may want that safe space to be in the classroom, but you may not have the opportunity. It may also be created on one-on-one. Do you have your reference consultations, do students with your institutions, do they have to make appointments? No, they can just walk in, others are saying yes? Okay, but it can be one-on-one. But understand that it's going to be incremental. Understand that it's going to be ongoing. But once you start creating that safe space, just be sure that it's going to be continued, the students are going to recognize it, and know that, as I said, I'm repeating myself, but that it's going to be ongoing. We've all had what I call the chorus of crickets, where you just know, they know the answer, Silence. But I think that at that point, it's a great opportunity. What I tend to tell my students is like, this is a time where it's fine not to know. I don't expect you to have the answers for everything. And very often what happens is that gives them permission to not know. They may give a wrong answer, or they may just not even understand what you're asking, at which point they'll ask a question which someone else may have had as well. So again, it turns into a way to reinforce this idea that you will be learning from your mistakes. You don't have to know the answer, and it's okay to not get it right all the time. And something else that we do with our class, you have those people that race to the answer. They write their assignment, and they're sitting there looking left to right to see who's still working because they are finished. So, and that makes other students nervous. They may be anxious because it's like, well, should I have gotten this? I mean, they seem to be finished. Why am I not finished? What we tend to do at the end of class, when we are going to collect the papers, we'll give the students the option to continue working on it. They can put in more effort if that's what they want to. Try new strategies. And this will be for someone that had raced to the answer, or folks that, it sort of takes the pressure over folks that perhaps didn't get it yet. And if you wanted to hand the paper in, then so be it. But again, what we're trying to do is sort of shift from praising that ability. Oh, you got this right. I knew you were going to, you're fabulous at this. And shifting it more towards effort and process, so that students get a sense of, we were talking about effort earlier, but this is within their control. If they want to spend another hour on it or not, if they want to try another search term or not, that's something that puts it more within their control rather than it being about them thinking it's their ability or lack thereof. So, to incorporate failure, again, what we want to do is to create an opportunity for meaningful struggle to promote resilience. And again, reinforce the iterative process of research. Create assignments that could be a bit more challenging, not so straightforward, and even if the class does get the exercise, tease out other questions that that may challenge them. Ask additional things that they can glean from the particular exercise. I say it's sort of like they look at, rather than looking at it as a square, they look at it as a cube to understand that there's some depth to what it is that they're supposed to be learning. What happened in our class, in which we were sort of turned into one of our aha moments, we had an assignment and students were asked to locate a disability standard for payments. Now, there was a regulation for that, but then there was another regulation with the same title, similar text, but it was for Social Security, aging or something or other. But there were two separate programs. So we distributed the assignment, and one of our students just dove in, started working. As we were going around, we noticed that he was going down the wrong path. But we didn't correct him. We kept an eye on him, but didn't correct him. Then as we saw that he was still going down the wrong path, we pointed it out to him. Now, of course, he was just shocked. But we said, what we want you to do is think about where you are. Think about how you got here. Step back and see what other options you may have. And we're pleasantly surprised, but he said, I get it. He dove in again, and he did the exercise. And what was really nice about this was when we started talking about the exercise, he had more reflection about what he learned and what he got out of the exercise than, is there a check plus? He got more out of it than that person did. So this was that's an example of a kind of guided failure where we let him work through that meaningful struggle for an opportunity for resilience. And so, you know, it's important because, you know, when students can get through and know that they can get through it, it sort of gives them that little extra oomph they need later on. And when we talk about feedback, we know that students need accurate assessments in order to improve. But for our purposes, when we talk about feedback, we want to encourage meaningful struggle and resilience. So, and admittedly, this can be tough because, as we mentioned earlier, the way, depending on the student, the way someone with a growth mindset receives feedback differs from someone with a fixed mindset. And thing is that the thing to be conscious of is when a student with a growth mindset, again, looks at it as a tool to improve and promote deeper learning, whereas someone with a fixed mindset may view the feedback as blameworthy, and not just to blaming the teacher or the exercise, but they may feel judged and defeated. So when there's negative feedback or feedback that a student may deem as disappointing, you know, it's important to incorporate growth language with your feedback because you don't want them to feel, I think Bishop calls this sense of helplessness. So to promote growth language, again, I'm going to say it again, reinforce the iterative process of research. Praise the strategy, the process, and the effort, not the ability, as I said earlier. By just praising the ability, you may create what Dweck calls a false mindset, where when this student does get in a situation of difficulty and they need that resilience for meaningful struggle, they don't have the tools necessary. So by praising the process, you appreciate the work, they tried new strategies, or praising the effort that someone put in. But effort has to yield benefits. And if it's not yielding benefits, then that might be the meaningful struggle that you're going to work on with that student. And there might be some self-evaluation that might be involved. Ask the student. So when you had a paper or an assignment that you were satisfied with, well, like how much time did you put into that? Or what did you do? What type of search strategies did you use? You know, it's something where it's more reflective and they can see within themselves that it's something within their control that perhaps they can apply more time to. Something I liked when I was in school was checklists. And it's sort of, the thing about checklists, it helps students see, as we were talking about before, that trajectory of learning new skills. It lets them see, you know, where they've gone, where they started and where they've gone. And more importantly, it gives them a vocabulary. It gives them a new vocabulary and it shows their point of growth. You may want to try like additional tools, or as I said earlier, to resubmit an exercise as helping to help them to get through. But when you're giving feedback to students, it is important that you use the growth mindset terminology again to promote their effort, to encourage their effort, to encourage their, and it wasn't like, because when I was listening this morning, I thought, well, I didn't really think of effort quite the same way as this negative thing. It's something that you're telling a student, this is within your control, and together we can work to encourage more and to encourage new processes. So, you know, as I said, those were the things that we thought about with creating a safe space, giving proper feedback or encouraging feedback to students, and to give an exercise that may be a bit more challenging. Understand this also, that we're describing failure, or we're defining failure by way of an exercise. But it can be whatever it is you want. On a one-on-one, if a student requests information at the reference desk, again, it's just let them stumble a little, and then help them back, okay? So what we'd like to do, does anyone have any questions? No? Yeah.
I had a question. So I've heard about, the growth and fixed mindsets, but I have not researched this area myself. And I'm just wondering, can you be both at the same time, or is it a global?
Absolutely, and I probably changed a dozen times just being up here. The point is understanding where you are. It's about giving, that's what I was talking about, false mindset with a student that you praise all the time that may not have the tools in a difficult situation to pull through. It depends on the circumstances. It may change. Depends on the circumstances, depends on what you're working on or what they're doing, and it may change. And it's also important, I think, for all of us as instructors to know what our mindset might be. And everyone has both. But you have the point is to understand what triggers the fixed mindset, so that you have the tools to pull out of it. You have the tool to get through that meaningful struggle, the resilience to get through that meaningful struggle, okay? So what
I was gonna say that one of the, thinking about myself, like, even though I, read a lot about growth mindset, I'm really like trying to develop it. For example, when it comes to things like athletics, I probably have a very fixed mindset myself, where I'm like, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. Instead of thinking about like what can I do to grow? Where am I? And like, what skills can I master? It just becomes, nope, can't do it, not athletic. Which is, very different from the way I think about other things. So I do think it's very context specific.
Yeah, for sure. So what we'd like to do, like in your groups, just talk amongst yourselves. And what we want to think about,
we were, just so that we're sort of all on the same page, we were gonna use the frame of searching as strategic exploration. And think of an exercise that might be related to that.
something brief, yeah.
Or something you've already done, and how you might incorporate failure into that exercise, how you might make a safe space for it, and what kind of feedback could you give for it to encourage growth mindset, and then also like what could go wrong, what are the pitfalls?
What are some of the pitfalls, or what are some of the things that you think that you might have to overcome?
We'll give it 15 minutes.
Yeah, 15 minutes or so. Yeah. I know, I do have a soft job.
I'm going to the framework now. Because I see the account myself, I don't know it. I don't know it. Believe it or not.
So one thing that I do that I kind of incorporates failure is that I like to play games so that it's something low stakes but fun. So you like to get involved but you are going to learn that people that necessarily might not care about database, you're going to still learn something about So it's basically relational techniques, and I usually have like Dawn's cornucopia of corny prizes. But I'm just saying, one of the things that we do, like, get the answer right, they get something very easy. How do you do it?
can't imagine they would want to see. Yeah.
And then the search, they replicate search and talk about
Surprisingly.
how it went.
Wrong, but it was fun, because we're doing it in class, but if
We don't expect them to.
tuna fish or whatever, was the wrong answer, but it still was enjoyable. So we made the process of learning what is database, what is real in the library. It's a little more engaging, not as so much.
I think it's easier to do
Let's just rely on not exact science.
I even often
So
say,
if you're looking for
what happened
whatever
to
what you're
science.
saying about,
There's no,
first time I
it's not.
let them sort of
2 + 2 = 4.
get off a little bit.
Being in everything.
Maybe a couple of minutes, we talk about this a lot.
Yeah, because
You know, and
I think what ends up happening
with
with
time is more than one way to
comes into
find
it. I think when students come in, they're in the phase. They're like, oh crap, I've got to do
the number of terms.
I've got to get graded.
You know, just so you can understand the research.
Which, I mean, is a legitimate concern.
It's going to use
The other
the
side.
And then they need to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to, in terms of
finish the class and graduate. But what I like to try to do is not discount that, but kind of bring them more into the, in order to get
But their topics are always so.
whatever it is that you want. So I'm not gonna judge them as, oh, you shouldn't worry about that. Why would I say that? You know, I would be, I was that way, you know, I still would be if I was research. But I think it's sort of creating that,
To fail a lot.
right.
and really using,
But it doesn't happen every time.
I think when you share a failure,
And we're okay.
Make myself.
to me it's important.
Later we make
As
it private.
But I think that, like, this is expert searching. Go find some
I
perfect.
feel
It's
so
like,
bad.
you
I
know,
have trouble
try
with
and
this. I have,
mitigate
so
that.
they
Look at
know
an
that,
expert,
oh, they're
book
not
more about it.
talking to
It's not
somebody
perfect. I
who's
make mistakes too. You know, I
maybe
spell
the
words
professor's
wrong.
saying, well, I know everything there is to know about this topic.
Try and make sure that
That's part of like,
I think this is correct.
I mean, if you have a whole, like, if I'm actually teaching a course, I would like to write, if it doesn't work the first time,
If I had a dime for
deliberately or explicitly, like, this is my respectful space, safe space that we are creating and sharing together. We can't do that with these records. So, I mean, one of the things that I'll do is I always do live demos on
Allowing
Canva. So I have them come up with a topic, and sometimes it totally fails, and sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes I spell things wrong, and sometimes we don't have anything on that topic. And so I talk through, how live demos, using live demos is a great talk about. We're supposed to coming up with but demonstrating it, sometimes there are no results if you search it like this, and this is why you have to tweak it so they can see in real time how some searches go from 0 results to some results, or from overwhelming number of videos to some results, like so they see that. And so when they are then struggling later, hopefully they can vaguely remember. That's what I'm
There's nothing, and I can't change my I signed up for it. I'm freaking out. I can't find it. So we try to do it. One of my objectives that I have. So we do a lot of
Well, different than when it's like, well, this is what women do. And that's the struggle. Professors who
you can see them on my phone.
somebody else before they've even
Yeah, I think
Usually you don't even come up with it until the end.
ourselves as well, so I'm not gonna say it's just trees. We have the sense of like everything happens in and research and writing is more of a process, and it's not. You know, but the mindset is that if you have an assignment, it's due on this date. If it's a scaffold assignment, it's even worse because it's like these things here, and so I will take every opportunity to sort of talk about
One of the things that I mentioned, John, is that sometimes I've
certain
learned
and it loops and it loops and it's okay. You know, and I said,
think about failure.
you know, if they're early on in the process,
Always feel any question,
your
question, silence, and like, you know, and sometimes it can
and it's uncomfortable for them because they want to do something that's like the uncertainty.
what I've come to realize is that it's not
But it's like,
it's not or it's interesting. Sometimes they they're nervous. They don't want to say the wrong thing. And I've had people do instruction. Any questions? So in five from middle class, 4 or 5 questions, or if you're doing activity questions about the one over. A lot of times it's sometimes students don't want to hear. They want to ask them questions.
It's the same in the beginning.
It wasn't the right kind of question.
yeah. Yeah, if you can answer it, just if you can answer the question that you had in the beginning, then what have you done?
That's not what you're writing. You should be writing about something. Yeah, but I also make a lot of mistakes doing the searches. Even unintentionally. I find something that
I don't need to spell things wrong.
and if I'll find something that the spelling error. Oh, yeah. I'll find something like an hour ahead of the class. And I'll go in and I'll find it. This was just on my computer.
So one thing you see how hard this is, helps me as a form of assessment, because I find out, okay, they actually didn't have it, tell them in regards to this, but I need to try to
Google and find it. Everybody in this country would have a PhD. If you could use Google for research, everybody in this country would have a PhD. That's how hard this is. It doesn't probably didn't help us.
That they're adding their voice to the conversation.
They talk about like
Right, yeah. It may be people that have the same question, but no one's asking.
Research is about
They don't want to
searching and finding, but it's not about revising and synthesizing. Oh crap. This guy's got 50 articles from today's store. Awesome. So, and it's so bad. It's so teach it perfectly, but it's like it's so hard. And like they're just like because they're and they should be happy that they have something. Like yes, I have something to work with. I have something to work with. And I'll tell them that too. You know, if I sit down with somebody and we go through, it'll be fine.
Right, so you're kind of, you're all right with the clip.
I'm not going to. I think that they are, but it doesn't mean I'm not writing your paper. I'm not answering
Next
questions.
class.
Because
we can't find what they want us to find that makes, you know.
I hope that
I can find it in Estonia, you know.
I mean, most of the time I've been on the flyer with the professors who are they're engaged, so but at the same time, I wonder if the reason that half of them don't say
A lot of good conversations going, so we'll do a 3-4 more minutes and then we'll gather and discuss.
my schedule.
That's one of the reasons that I do a kind of a pre, so I'll ask their questions, but I'll also have folks write down what's one thing they want to get out of the session. And then it's usually things that fall into categories that I was going to teach anyway. But then I will answer those questions as and you know, and I cluster them by topic, so it's visually clear that other people have these questions too. To signal to students that they are not alone in this gap in knowledge, and when it's like if there's only one on a topic, I'll usually like call, and I never like look for the person to expand on it. It's like this question, yeah, because it gives, it's true with librarians too, like it gives people space to ask a question without making it and showing a depth. So that's a space for questions. I don't think that's necessarily a failure thing, but it helps me. One thing I've done with some students, some sessions, I haven't done in a while, is I'll have them come up with some research strategies, so how brainstorm, like, okay, here's your research with students on a case study, and I'm like, okay, so come up with research strategies. Okay, now assume you don't get any results, what are you gonna do here? Like, if this didn't work, what would be your next step? So priming them to think about having a next step before they are faced with needing to have the next step.
They don't want you to feel like you're pushing stepping on them.
I think it just wants help and then out of your house and research and then well, I already
Right.
you know, and then just like
Okay, so,
Never happens.
ready?
One more source to confirm.
oh, I wish I could grab and then
So what are some ways that folks came up with incorporating failure into their exercise?
I'm gonna try to write some of your responses up here.
Is this a chorus of crickets? Oh no.
Well, I was saying how sometimes one of my biggest fears going into a class is not going in with a demo search already planned out. Like having, like, this is the topic I'm going to research and I already know this works because I planned it out. And I was just saying how I feel like I need to be braver about going in and asking for a topic and trying it out. And when it doesn't work, using that as an opportunity to be like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I didn't, you know, this one didn't work, but what can we do to change it?
That's great, 'cause and
I feel like I need to be brave.
we had that discussion, because I used to do demos, and I basically scrapped like basically all demos. I don't do, maybe if it's something we really need to show them, but demos, if they happen after they're already done doing their part. Just to clarify, this is where, this is the button where, you know, you were looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
We talked about prepping a search, but prepping a search that isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Good too.
Won't work. Do you have examples for that?
No.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things I try and do is when I'm teaching classes is to let the students know, the class know that research isn't a perfect science. So there's no one way to get to where you want to go, so you can use different terms that you may not find is that what you look for the first try. It's, you know, to keep trying, to not, you know, keep the
Don't get discouraged.
get discouraged and keep the expectations not necessarily low, but not think that if I put this one word, it's going to give me everything I want.
Everything you
Right.
need.
You know, there may be several different ways to
There's,
teach
you know, we're at a point where students have all seen a Google box,
Right.
you know?
I think that also relates to creating a safe space.
Yeah.
When you go in, and you just tell them, like, you're not gonna find everything, you may not find what you want. That's okay, it's not a perfect, there's nothing perfect about research, it's very messy.
And it's sort of a form of storytelling in a way by you going through a search and it's just not working. They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
And we all survived. Yeah.
I've actually prepped class doc demos that did not work half hour after I prepped them.
Right.
So I've gotten up there, gone to show them, and I'm like, it's not coming up. It was there a half hour ago, and it's not coming up now.
I think I know.
And then I tell them, if
if research was easy, then anybody in the United States who had an internet connection to Google would have a PhD. We'd all have PhDs if research was easy. But I'm also thinking, one other comment about this is that I've watched that Tidying Up by Marie Kwan, or whatever her name is. And it seems like it's a parallel, because she makes everybody make a mess in order to go through the process of organizing.
I see.
Yeah.
So if you had the students all have their all their resources that they think they have, and then go through and try and figure out whether or not they're meaningful, then maybe it would be the same kind of process. I'm not sure.
Right. No, yeah. You know, going back to the things that change, I feel like there's at least at law school, because of the recent things that have been happening in the world, like the legal infrastructure, it changes a lot.
Yeah, and they tend to do it like a week before the class begins.
Exactly.
Did anyone
regulation notes are there.
Where is it? Where did it go?
This executive order? Well, no, it's something different now. And you know, that's an opportunity for us, you know, because it shows them that it's just nothing static either.
Yeah.
So like between you and the system, you know, it's gonna get messy.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
I can imagine creating an exercise where students are going to experience some failed searching. But my question is sort of a little bit more about, can you describe a little bit more about how you create that environment so the students don't feel like you set them up? That it's not like a gotcha moment when they do fail?
We tell them. I mean, you be open with them, you know. You say you're going to learn from struggle. You're going to, you know, that they understand that you sort of look at failure or just not getting it immediately as part of what's the learning process.
The one thing we sometimes say to our students is, we're failing, we're making our mistakes now so that we don't have to do it so much when we're lawyers. And that's great. This is why we made this space. We made this time. Now is the time to just let it all go. Make the mistakes, fail in every way. Because that's what we're supposed to do.
But to your point, I can see where they may look at it as though you're sabotaging that safe space. But I think by letting them know initially that how failure can be a tool in not getting it right, and that concentrating on, concentrate on a time where you got a good grade and you made, what kind of effort did you put into that? Or, you know what I mean? Or what kind of strategies did you have? You know, if they got something correct, sort of like the student that we have. It's like, well, what did you do? Where would you go? What other things would you think of? It'd be about effort. It'd be about new strategies, the process, not that they didn't do it, you know?
Relating to the topic of safe spaces, this is related to a whole bigger ideology. But instead of making it a safe space, you could make it a brave space. Where it's not that everything's gonna be okay. So some things might not be okay, and that's fine.
And that's
We're gonna
okay.
figure out what to do about it.
Right.
Right.
So that's a great segue. So the next thing are ways to make it a safe space. What did anyone come up with? Strategies other than what we talked about? Something you may have experienced yourself in the classroom? I think I heard you there early this morning talking about students being vulnerable. I heard you.
You did.
And I was like, space.
That was my clone. That was. I mean, I think it's just. Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I think it works. It might work better in a one-on-one situation.
Right. It's
right.
But I mean, it definitely can apply to a group. I think a lot of it is how, as you said, being upfront about what's going to happen, so they know what to expect. And then when things happen, because sometimes we subconsciously, like if somebody gives a crazy answer or something, like whoa, you know, like there are nonverbal things that happen. It's like you need to be aware of like, all right, if you're creating this space, don't do something
You're
that completely
absolutely right.
destroy it.
Because, you know, when we were doing this research, there was one point that I think they were saying as instructors, if someone gives this crazy answer that you don't go, yes. And I'm like, oh my God, I've done that.
And
That's I'm putting that under pitfalls. I'm not, like, you know, you try to make everything smooth, and you're like, oh, you know, I don't know how to put that. A pitfall. Don't I don't know.
I would say
act
set
shocked.
set expectations you can meet. So if
Right.
you're gonna say it's a safe space, it's then on you as the instructor to maintain it as a safe space.
Right.
Don't jaw drop.
And I don't think it's anything that's gonna be, and I don't think that it's safe space isn't created like immediately though.
Yeah.
I think it's incremental.
I think you can create like a safe first space maybe, but it is incremental. Like if it's a one shot, you can do your best to in that one time period set expectations for that one shot. But then, but if you have like more time over the semester, I think you can create.
They're in
safer-
different ways. It happens in different ways.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that something that I try to do is when technology fails me, which is going to happen. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
No matter how carefully we
Right.
prepare.
If I'm in the room, it's 50%.
That, you know, I worked really hard at like not getting flustered in front of the students, and so that usually what I say is something like, oh, look at that. Well, that's you know, I guess I'll have to look into that later. Let's
Right.
try something different.
Yeah.
You know, and just to also show them like it might happen to you too. You know, you might run into this problem.
Right.
You know, and don't let that deter you from trying to get to the articles that you're trying to find. You know, that we're humans too.
Right.
You know, we feel like we have superpowers, but we're human.
Right. Right.
So just going back to the ideas of deep learning versus strategic learning, I think one of the big strengths that we bring as librarians who are not their primary instructors is that we are not grading them on their work. So we have an opportunity to offer really authentic assessment that they can grow from without the high stakes of a grade. And I think that that's something we don't use enough.
Yeah, authentic assessment. That's I think with safe space, and also with feedback.
That's very important. Okay, so we have a few minutes. What about pitfalls? Did anyone come up with some pitfalls? Yes.
Bad assignment. A bad assignment from the instructor.
Oh.
How do you how would you define that? Sometimes bad assignments are good assignments.
Looking for let's see. Looking for a peer review article about your hometown. Let's see.
How does that? I don't explain that.
Huh?
How is that bad?
It sets from my perspective, it sets either the student or myself up for failure. So if you have an assignment that's really esoteric, I can't find anything for it. It to me it shows the student that, well, if he can't find anything for it, how can I find anything for it? And it also makes it more frustrating for the student. You know, so
Right.
it's helpful for if you're instructor creating an assignment, you should have an idea of what resources we have, so that you can ideally, so we can create an assignment that's beneficial.
So they have sort of confidence in you?
I don't know. I guess. Well, I guess one thing is a lot of times when instructors are when I'm teaching a class, the instructor will say, "Hey, this is Mr. Hampton. He is the expert in searching." And I don't call myself that, but that's what they're kind of portraying me as. And if I can't find what they're looking for, if their assignment is to write a 10-page paper on, you know, their hometown using peer review sources, and I don't find that, it can be frustrating. I mean, you can work around it obviously, but it's just frustrating.
That's the faculty not knowing what the sources
Right,
are.
right,
What the
right.
sources are.
Like we get one professor who makes students write papers like 5 or 8 page papers on food. So a student will be like, I need to write a 5 to 8 page paper on cheesecake, and I'm like,
And they have to use
books.
We don't have books on cheesecake.
We don't collect
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing that might happen is when, and we talked about this at our table, is when the professor expects students to come in with a highly defined thesis statement before doing any of the exploratory research.
Yeah. Oh,
And
right.
it's because they're really confused about the difference between a thesis statement and research question. And they're
Right.
rigid, they won't let them change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that when we talk about, for us, it's like you come up with your like legal issue statement. And I'm like, sometimes we don't know what the legal issue statement is until we like dive in, get like a view of the topic and figure out like what like legal issues are even involved. So sometimes I do feel like professors might do that. They're like, oh, well, because the professor like already knows.
Has some vague idea about what they want.
Exactly. Like, oh, yeah, I totally see that. We have maybe a couple seconds also for feedback. If anyone has any ideas on like what a way that you could give feedback to promote growth mindset.
Yeah.
I think always have them, and this may not be specific to what they've done, but always have them know that you will be a welcoming person to them for the future.
Yeah.
And that they can come ask questions.
Yeah.
You're here for them.
We have a good story about that.
Yeah, what the help, when having students seek help, which is part of sort of that shift, which I struggle with. I had a student, what else could we do, Help. Yeah, after class, come see us. Email, please come by, stop by. Nothing.
Yeah.
And then after class, he asked me, how many students came for help? It was almost as though, and I felt like, what else could I have done? Because he just needed that permission to say, all right, I'm gonna go get some help with this. But what he did say by the time we finished our chat, he said, going forward, I'm gonna ask for help. So maybe not with my class, but going forward with other classes, he'll seek help, because that's part of it too.
Right.
Anyway, we're running out of time.
Oh.
So I was just want to say quickly that we enjoyed being here. We just wanted to just again say that we think that by incorporating failure in a research exercise is going to promote the opportunity for meaningful struggle, cultivate growth mindset, and resilience. But moreover, we think that the growth mindset, meaningful struggle, and resilience has a direct positive effect on a student's mastery of legal research or research in general because of the iterative and analytical process of problem solving inherent in research as a whole. So we think that it's also good to know to test your own mindset. And as I said, we spoke earlier that people they have both generally.
Right. Different at different times.
At different times.
For
And
different
here are a few
contexts.
of the articles that we